All right. Thanks everyone for coming out. I know there's probably a lot of other things you want to do on your weekends, a lot of sports ball to be watched, but you also want to be a developer, and I mean, you're here, and that's a really great first step. There's a lot of people who are not here and not doing anything, and you're actively doing it, so that's awesome. Title of this talk is How to Become a Developer. It's a collection of a lot of the experiences that I've had, some of the things I think I did right, and almost everything I did wrong, as well as the experiences of some people that I've helped mentor through this process. Just recently, there was a guy who had no programming experience at all, just got his first job 2 months ago, and so this is really fresh on my mind, and I know the great things that tech has done for my life, and so I'm really happy to share with you guys, maybe help you learn some things that the easy way. So, I'm John. I'm a developer and a consultant, and I like doing things outside of computers sometimes. And this talk is based on a series that I wrote on my blog, also called How to Become a Developer. Siri, no. Why are you doing that? And the goal here is to become fully employed as a software developer. Like, that's where we want to go. And so the structure for this talk is we're going to talk about why you might want to become a developer, what skills you might need, what kind of developer, what type of development. Talk about, like, okay, how do you actually do that? And also talk about how to get your first job, with a little bonus of how to be an outstanding junior developer. So I imagine you have some reasons why you want to become a developer, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And to me, there's really two groups, and I think there are practical reasons, I think there are personal reasons. I mean, the biggest practical one, just right up front, like, it pays pretty good. I mean, if you look up the median developer salary in your area, it's pretty good. And the rate at which you can increase that is probably higher than about any other field out there. Secondly, I think there's huge market potential still to be had for development. I mean, everything has programming in it. You can tweet from your fridge if that's a thing that you would want to do. And so programming has given us such incredible scale and efficiency in business. Like, it's here to stay. And while there may be some type of super AI that can program itself and take over the world, I mean, somebody's got to make that. Might as well be you. Why not? Is there anybody here who has an app idea or a business idea that involves technology? If you do, learning to program is a great way to bootstrap those ideas. I've talked to a lot of people who have business ideas, and they are almost helplessly lost trying to find programmers, figure out what they need, like project manage. It's incredibly tough. And so getting this skill set is incredibly beneficial if you actually want to make something with it yourself. And then lastly here, I think it's important to know that this is a known path. Okay, we're not finding cures for cancer, we're solving mathematical theorems that have been unsolved for 500 years. Like, there's a way to do this, and I don't want to underestimate the amount of hard work that it takes, because it does take a lot of hard work, but it's not hard. And I think that's a really important distinction. It is not hard. It is very doable, but it does take a lot of hard work. So moving on to some personal reasons. I think some people are surprised when they start programming because they do it for all those practical things, and then they find that they really just love it for what it is. And one of those reasons, I think, is that programming to me is pure creation. And if you have a creative itch, it will scratch that itch. A lot of people think about, creativity is art or music or dance or something like that. But to me, creativity is anything where you have made something that was no longer there, or that was not there before you started. There's this tweet going around recently by a conference that said, what 5 words best describe programming? And I really like Ryan's answer here. Making invisible robots from words. Like, when you program things, you're commanding bits of matter to do stuff based on secret keywords that you type on your computer. Like, that's kind of crazy if you think about, like, what actually happens when you program something. To me, I also like programming because it's a domainless tool. Programming is a very good tool, and it's great at what it does, but you can like programming and at the same time not do it for programming. Like, if you like cats or you like music, you can apply programming to those things. So real quick, let's talk about some reasons why you may not want to become a developer. And to me, you don't like computers. Notice I didn't say you were not good at computers. I said you do not like them. You don't like desk jobs? Sitting at a desk sucks. I mean, it's awful for your health, and it can start to be kind of painful over time. And also, if you don't like learning new things, programming is not for you. The world of programming adapts so quickly and changes so fast. If you're not learning, you're going to get left behind. Now, there's a notable exclusion there, I think. Some of you might be thinking, oh, I'm not good at math, or I'm not smart. And these are just silly things we tell ourselves based on a teacher we had in high school or an experience we had. This is just not true. Like, you don't have to be smart. You are smart enough. You don't have to be good at math. There's really not that much math in programming. Okay, so moving on to what skills do we need? You might be surprised that I only put one thing in this list. And to me, that is pure and utter determination. Like, you have to know that you're going to beat this little piece of metal, and it may kick you down a couple times, but in the end, you're going to triumph and learn this, and you can do it. That's all you need. So when I started in programming, it was the first day my freshman year in college, in the computer science program, and I had done no programming, had absolutely no idea. And it kicked my butt continually. And it was awful, and I had no idea what I was doing. Every Tuesday we got a project. Every Tuesday I got depressed, and I felt like I couldn't find the help. I couldn't figure it out, but I kept going. And sophomore year, picked up a couple more things. Junior year, picked up a couple more things again. Felt like, okay, I've got some fundamentals. You know, I can make some programs. And so I finally graduated the program. I know some things. And I got my first job as a web developer. And computer science and web development are very different. And so I felt like the ground was ripped out from underneath me again, and I was hopelessly lost because they're just totally different concepts. But after my first job, I got my second one, and I noticed that I'd learned some things. And third job, I learned some more things. You know, I'm not getting stuck as often. I'm not getting stuck for as long when I do get stuck. And so over time, you build up these skills, you build up this knowledge, and you can get there. The path is known. So skills you don't need: tech savviness, good at math and science, a computer science degree. I'm sure there are a lot of people to see that. If you have questions about that, we can talk about it after the talk, but you don't need a computer science degree. I had a friend of mine who gave me an analogy that I really liked, and he talked about being a welder versus a material scientist. And to me, programming is like being a welder. You have tools, it's a skill and a craft that you learn how to do. Now, if you want a computer science degree, I relate that more to material science. You're discovering new materials. You're worried about the theory of how things work. Now, would a material science degree help you as a welder? Probably, but it's not required. And so if that's something that interests you, go for that degree. But it's not a prerequisite. Again, it's not hard, but it takes a lot of hard work. There's this blog that I found that said, "This is why learning Rails is hard." And they had this mind map of skills you have to pick up. And that's kind of daunting, and I don't show you that to freak you out. But there's a lot of things there. But the thing is, you don't start eating the whole elephant. You do it one bite at a time. And so you pick up the first node, maybe on each of those things. Then maybe you get the second one and the third. And over time, you build up this really impressive knowledge of skills because the web is continually evolving, and there's much more to learn than there was 5-10 years ago. So let's talk about what kind of developer we want to be. Development is kind of like music in that music has genres and instruments. You might, if you wanted to be a musician, you'd say, I want to be an electric guitarist in a rock band, or I want to play bass in a jazz trio. And development has very similar things. Just like music has genres, programming has types of applications. And before somebody gets really angry in the chat, this is a simplified view. There's probably more things are left out, but just for our sake of conversation, I put them in these 4 groups. The first one I'm calling websites. And this term might confuse you, but to me, this is what a website is. You can actually go to this link, it's still up. It's just like you would have a filing cabinet with physical drawers. A website is just virtual documents with links to flip the pages. Now, we kind of colloquially use this term for things like this, which I'm calling web apps. So Facebook, Gmail, Slack. And web apps are things that are interactive. So you have an account. You're submitting data. The data you get back is contextualized to you specifically. Next, we have native apps. You know what these are. This is your Slack client. For your desktop, these are the things on your phone. And the fourth one I'm just calling generic Internet of Things. This is more the like device sensory kind of communication stuff. So out of all of these, you want to make web apps. And the reason you want to do this is because web apps are really at the core of all these other things. The skills you pick up making a web app will either directly or indirectly transfer to whatever you're doing. If you want to make a mobile app, that data is coming from somewhere. It's coming from an API, it's coming from a web app. You want to do Internet of Things, that's like all APIs, like things talking to each other. So web apps is an amazing place to start. Don't make websites. Websites are dead, and you don't want to do that. Okay, so what kind of development do we want to do? In this, I've broken it kind of into two categories. First one is the front end. This is the thing that you interact with. This is the presentation layer. It's the thing that takes the data and then makes it in a human, readable, workable way. And so a front-end developer is concerned with things like, how does it look? How does it feel? How do you interact with it? You probably use technologies like HTML, CSS, JS, React, Angular, Ember. In contrast to that, we have the back end. And for this slide, I Googled back-end cloud architecture, and this was the first image I got, which is perfect, but I love especially on the side how it says the back end goes to the front end through internet connection. Just take that in. Okay, but seriously, the back end powers the front end. This is stuff like servers, network requests, databases. You're dealing with things like how do you store and retrieve data properly? How do you authenticate users? You use something maybe like Ruby, Python, Rails, Node. And so do you want to be front end or back end? That's a good question. The answer is yes. You want to be what we call full stack. By learning this incredible breadth of skills, you'll have everything you need to specialize in whatever you end up wanting to do. If you saw Ryan's talk a couple weeks ago in an interview, and he talked about T-shaped people, you want to build the top of your T. You want to have exposure to this wide variety of things. And over time, you'll be like, you know, I really like building reactive front ends, or I really like doing database stuff. And so you'll build the stem of your T and really start to specialize down in one particular area. Okay, that's enough theory. You guys want to know how do I actually do this? So let's talk about that. First thing you need to do is choose your tool. Now this can be kind of daunting. There are a lot of programming languages out there. There's a lot of information, but there really is not a bad choice, unless you didn't pick Bulbasaur, in which case you chose poorly. The thing is any experience is good experience when you start. There's kind of this weird phenomena with weightlifting where if somebody came to you and said, I want to raise my bench press. If you told them to go run every day a mile for 4 weeks, it would raise their bench press, which makes no sense, but when you're in such an unadapted state, any experience moves you towards where you want to go. So especially in the beginning, don't worry about it. Just pick something, do something. It will become clear how to move and pivot as you go along the way. Okay, but seriously, what language? Just tell me a language, please. Before I do that, I have to give you a disclaimer. So asking a programmer what language you should use is incredibly biased. Like people have chosen languages and based their entire career around these things. Okay, this is like asking, try not to offend people, somebody in a multi-level marketing scheme, like, which should I use your competitor or the other one? Like you're getting a pitch. You're getting a really strong pitch. You're signing up right there. Okay, so if you talk to somebody and they don't give you this disclaimer, you should not listen to this person. Like they're obviously so biased they cannot see it. So with all that being said, you guys are all doing HTML, JavaScript, CSS. Keep it up. Those are great. You need those. For a backend language, I recommend Ruby. And there's a big asterisk here that I'll talk about later. But you want to pick a language that is stable. If you're trying to learn it and the components of the language are changing out from under you between versions, you're not going to have a good time. Cough, Angular 1 to 2. You want it to be beginner friendly. C and C++ are amazing, powerful languages, but they're not beginner friendly. Like, don't give yourself more pain than you have to at the beginning. You want something that has a large community. Okay, you want something where when you go to Google, the first 10 hits are for that language. You don't want to start learning something and then you go to get that job and they're like, I've never heard of that. Like you picked randomnoun.js, like 5 people use that in the world. You want something that has a web framework because you want to make web apps. And you want something that has been around for a while, but is still being maintained. And that's kind of a balance that you have to work, but it's important that it's continually being improved, but it's not changing so fast that it's gonna blow you out of the water. So all that being said, I think all these are good languages to choose from. Someone is angry in the chat saying, .NET and Node are not a language. We can't hear you, so stop yelling. Just don't pick PHP. Just please pick one on the left. If you pick PHP, that's fine. Like you'll learn eventually. Sometimes bad experience points you towards good experience. Pick something you can make web things with. That's like the general point. Okay, so you picked a language, how do we do this? Step one is to learn the language itself. If I said, okay, we're gonna write a passionate political essay in German, but you don't know any German, you're gonna have a bad time. So you wanna learn the grammar. You wanna learn the words themselves, how to put them together. Then we'll talk about sentences. Then we'll talk about ideas and themes. You gotta learn the language yourself, or you're gonna be tripping over yourself trying to do stuff. So work through the language, and then make CRUD apps. This is both a description of the quality of your apps and the type of app itself. If you didn't know, CRUD stands for Create, Read, Update, Destroy. Okay, this is like a Facebook feed. You make posts, you edit posts, you get your posts back, and you can delete them. After you do that, you're learning the language, you're learning the tools around the language. Third, there's some concepts outside of CRUD that you need to become familiar with. These are things like APIs, database, CSS and JS frameworks, Bootstrap, Foundation, React, all that kind of stuff. I made this doc for somebody who is trying to go through this process. And it's not complete for sure, but there's some extra stuff in there if you're interested and you want to go look at it. And I don't think you have to do these three things like in order. Like do them at the same time. Learn some language stuff, make some CRUD apps, investigate something you don't know, and repeat. And just keep building and building on your knowledge. Okay, let's talk about getting your first job. Now, I'm going to quote myself, being quoted by Ryan, who's quoting me originally, when I say, this is probably the hardest part in the whole process, because there are a lot of things outside of your control with company logistics, the person that's interviewing you, where you're at in the world and where you're applying. Like, there's a lot of things out of your control here, but there are a lot of things that you can do. So here's some to-dos. Get a developer social media presence. Okay, this is Twitter. You are following major people in your framework. You're following the framework itself. If the framework has a new release, bam, you're smashing that retweet button. If I go to the internet and I put in your name, I want to see, oh, this person is in the developer world. Like, not that they're good or they're bad, but like they're at least in the same world that I am. If you don't have a blog or personal site, this is a great first thing to make as a CRUD app. Attend meetups like a fiend. You're already doing that, so congrats. Find the language that you're doing. If you're doing Python, Ruby, JS, go to that meetup every single time and talk to people. Okay, networking is like this big scary word. Like, find a nice person and go be nice to them and talk about development stuff. That's all you have to do. If you can, contribute to open source. It can be a little intimidating and tough to get into, but people, you think like, oh, how am I going to work on Rails? Like the framework, that sounds insane. But go read their documentation and fix typos. People love this. If you're like, hey, fix some typos, this is grammatically wrong, they love that kind of stuff. And it looks good on your GitHub. If someone's looking at your GitHub, they're not going to go look at what you did. They're just like, oh, he forked Rails? That's amazing. Like, he's working in Rails. Next step, have a GitHub. These are the big three: GitHub, Twitter, blog, or personal site. Answer questions on Stack Overflow. Now, I don't know a lot of people who are looking at Stack Overflow rep as like a metric, but it's hard enough to solve your own problems. Reading someone else's description and solving their problem is even harder. So if you get good at that, when you jump into a random code base at your new job, you'll be right at home. And then lastly, and probably the most important, make as many stupid apps as possible. Like as many, like dozens, hundreds if you can. And just absolutely dumb stuff. Like when Trump tweets, it emails your grandma. Just like literally anything you can think of, make an app out of it. Okay, so getting back to the first job. We've done all that stuff, we're prepping. What do? Step one, talk to recruiters. I got my first job through a recruiter. I don't even know how they found my email. She called me up one day and I got my first job through her, so that was great. They're recruiters that come to a lot of these meetups. Like, go talk to them, see, who's hiring, what stack are they hiring for, what kind of roles are you seeing in this city. Do all the normal job stuff. I mean, you're making resumes and cover letters and sending out cold emails, applying on job boards. Just do all those extra things, as the conventional job wisdom. Watch Ryan's talk on interviewing. Interviewing is an important part of the process. Tap your network. I hate this phrase, but go talk to the people that you talk to at the meetups. That's really as easy as it is. Like Ryan also mentioned, all my best jobs have come from a friend of mine telling me about it. Like, I had no idea it even existed. And they're like, hey, John would be good for this. And it works. That's how you're gonna get your best job. Okay, now coming back to the asterisk. In all transparency, Ruby is not big in the Oklahoma scene right now, company-wise. If your goal is to get a job in Oklahoma City, you're probably better off, as much as it pains me to say, doing .NET or Java, something JS-based, just because that's who's here in the city. And if you want to get your first job, it's probably, you should be learning the things that are here. I will say that I think the quality of jobs is higher in tools like Ruby. Like, if you want to be sitting at a coffee shop downtown with your MacBook, you're not going to do that at like bigcorporation.js. That's just not going to be how it is. But getting your first job is really important. It's really easy to pivot after that. And remember, any experience is good experience. Okay, let's talk about how to be an outstanding junior developer. So you got your first job, you're really excited. Step one, communicate really, 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 really well. Communication covers a multitude of sins. You're probably going to be working with some senior developer or a boss who's trying to coach you along the way. Communicate really well with them. Does anybody remember this? We're going to do a little good idea, bad idea. For communication, it errored. The page won't load. I'm stuck. All these things require the person to ask you a question again to get more information. When you're communicating, try to give them all the information you have so they can immediately start on your problem. It'll save time and also help from frustrating both of you. So I made a little Mad Lib for us. It goes like this. I'm working on blank, but when I try blank, blank happens instead. I've tried blank, blank, and blank, and looked at blank and blank. Example of this. I'm working on the user password reset bug. When I try to generate a password reset link, the user's token is already empty. I've looked at where the token is set, and I can see the token in the database, but the token is missing on line X. If you send me this, I know what you're doing, I know what you've tried, I know where you're at, and like telling me, hey, it's on this line, we can jump right there and start working on the problem. The next thing is to hone your Google foo. You think you can Google, but you cannot. You will learn. Googling well is a skill as much as being able to write Ruby. Okay, sometimes you just want to paste that whole bad boy in there. Just copy, paste, bam, first hit. That works well. Now, you want to remove project-specific info. Google does not know what undefined function, who's that Pokemon, it's Pikachu is, except that I already Googled it to make the slide, so it does. So you want to remove that kind of stuff. Undefined function Ruby, much better results. Next, use a try timer. I've worked places where this is specifically said, and in other places where it's kind of up in the air, but this is the amount of time you work on something before you ask for help. This could be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. And you want to give it your best shot and try and figure it out before you ask for help. Now, the important thing is, let's say you hit a problem, you get help, you're frustrated, but you move on, and then bam, a new error. What the tendency is to go ask for help immediately again. But reset the timer, try it again, remember to relax, take breaks if you need to, because the important part is you learning how to solve your problems, not finishing the task at hand. Like when you finish task A, they'll give you task B. After task B is task C. Like that happens forever. So for you to really grow as a developer, you want to learn how to fix your own problems. A couple miscellaneous tips. Ask the duck. Has anyone heard of rubber duck debugging? This is common in the programming world. I don't remember the exact origin, but there's a boss or a professor who put a literal rubber duck on his desk. And before people could ask him questions, they had to walk up and audibly ask the duck the question. And what they found is that when they asked the duck the question, they figured out the answer. And there's something about saying your question out loud, organizing it in a cohesive way where you have to explain to someone else, it uses your brain in a different way and you usually figure it out. So before you ask for help, ask the duck. Like, if you need to literally do that, that would be great. If I was a developer trying to mentor you and I saw that you had a duck, like, I would love that. Next, take notes. If you figure something out, just keep a little file open. At my first job, I literally had stickies that I stuck to my monitor. If you figure out, oh, how do I add a new database column in a migration? Jot some notes down. You're going to be referring to these things a lot, and it's impressive to see that when I see somebody that has taken notes and is really trying to learn and remember, versus someone who's just like, hey, how do I do this? And it's like, we've done this 6 times. Like, got to keep progressing. Lastly, fight imposter syndrome. If you don't know what this is this feeling that you'll experience at various points in your career where it seems like everyone else has it figured out, but you're faking it and you don't have it. And you could be feeling that right now, like, I'm not a developer, like, how do I do this? And this is absolute garbage. I love this picture because it shows that we all have different experiences and skills, and we overlap, but nobody just like completely bulldozes over you. Like, you have valuable experience, especially coming outside of the programming world, that you can bring to whatever you're doing. So lastly, I want to talk about closing the junior-senior gap. And a lot of people, when they think about these loose terms of junior and senior developer, they think, oh, the senior has all this knowledge, they have all this experience where they just know the answer. Like, they see something, it's just boom, they know it. And that is true to an extent, like, you will gain knowledge. But the thing that really separates someone who's, I think, a great developer and a good one is that great developers have a problem-solving system. They have honed and polished this system to where, yes, they may get stuck, but they are so fast at figuring it out because they go straight to the problem, they research, they implement it, and it works. And so I'm going to give you 5 debugging tips. You can use this from day 1 all the way throughout your career. Number 1, when you run into a problem, don't thrash your code. Most people, when they run into a problem, they just go crazy changing stuff. And you introduce like 5 new problems on top of the problem you already have. So don't thrash your code, use your system. Number 2, read the error message. Okay, no, but actually read it. I've seen a lot of people, they're just like, oh no, that's garbage, like computer barf, not gonna read it. Like, that is computer barf. And part of that is just like nonsense. But part of this is vitally helpful. It tells you what the error is and the exact file and line that it happened. So instead of just going crazy in your code, go straight to that line. It will save you so much time. Next, don't waste time on the impossible, or at least the improbable. There is a chance, although it is extremely low, that you will run into a core framework or language bug, or a browser bug, or an OS level bug. But the chances are you did something wrong. So I see a lot of people who, they're like, well, I set this thing to true, but it's still false, but I set it to true. And their mind is just like blown, like, how could it not be true? And so instead of saying, how could this not be true, say, how could this not be true, thinking emoji. Like, engage your brain and start to work through the system of like, okay, it's not true, accepted, how do I make it true? This next tip, if you took anything away, you could take one thing, this would be it. When in doubt, print more out. I do this every single day. Print stuff in your code. This shows you line by line what's happening, what's the data coming in, what's the data going out. Countless times, somebody will be like, oh, it just doesn't work, doesn't work, doesn't work. I'm like, okay, print the first line of your function. And they're like, oh, it's not being called. It's like, you spend so much time, and it's like your function's not even being called. So like, see exactly where you are, what's the data going in, what's the data going out. This will drastically speed up what you're doing. Okay, lastly, take it one step at a time. Even to this day, if I'm going to implement, say, a new feature in a web app, I will set up the route and the template and print the word hi to myself. And I will see that I can see the word hi on the screen before I do anything else. There's this tendency to like just going crazy in the code. I did this in school all the time. I'd get a project and 3 hours, just going hard. But like, all right, time to run, fails. It's like, well, what did I expect? I typed for 3 hours and didn't check anything. Take it one step at a time and print it out. Trust me, print it out. So to wrap up, I know I've thrown a lot of things at you, but I hope there's some direction and some belief you can get that you can do this. Lots of people have done it. I did it and struggled terribly. Hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. But in the end, you just got to believe you can do it and just get after it every day. A couple references for you. If you want to try Ruby, that's a great link. The Rails tutorial that I mentioned, like every Rails developer in the world has gone through that book, and it's amazing. Even if you don't end up choosing Rails, like that's probably still a good book to go through. That's the link to my extras doc, and then to Ryan's interview if you didn't see that talk. I'm at John Mosesman about everywhere on the web. If you want to talk, I'd be happy to talk with you, help you in any way I can. And with that, let's have some questions. Yes?
Hi. I know exactly what you're saying about Ruby. I went to the blog. I don't know what that is. Online boot camp, 14 weeks of Ruby. Now a lot going on in the whole city. And I was just kind of wondering, what kind of, as far as the learning path goes, what I should do as far as learning something that is more below basic like .NET. Should I go through the pre-code camp front-end certification and then start learning C# and going through .NET? How would you approach that?
It's a good question. So you're saying you've learned Ruby, but there's not a great scene here for that yet. What should you do next? I would say, I think picking another language is probably good. I think you'll find that a lot of the things you did in Ruby will directly transfer. Like the syntax is a little different, but the concepts are there. Like I said in the talk, I don't think it really matters which one you pick. I would talk to recruiters and see, who's hiring, whether that's .NET or something JavaScript based or whatever. In the meantime, so let me ask, what do you think the problem was in finding a Ruby job? Were you not able to find enough things to apply to, or you weren't able to get far enough?
That was it. I mean, there wasn't a lot out there that called for, there wasn't a whole lot of recruiters out there that wanted to see a that had nothing but Ruby projects.
Gotcha.
And there wasn't a lot of jobs out there that were, there's more of a lot of Ruby shops out there. It was all about that. It seemed like
Yeah.
some jobs.
Oklahoma is, or at least Oklahoma City is very .NET centric. So I don't think that is a bad career move. Like you're not going to regret learning .NET to work here. I think you can also, depending upon your level of experience, like you could keep making things. Like maybe there's a job out there that you could get if you had a little more exposure, a little more experience. But picking up something like JavaScript, whether that's Angular or React or something like that, like that's going to directly translate into any other job you do. So I don't think there's a bad option. I think you should have to kind of pick something, but definitely go talk to the recruiters and see just what's out there. Anyone else? Yes?
So when you know that you're ready,
Ready for the first job or? Oops. I don't think you ever hit a point where you're like, yeah, now I'm ready. I think it's just about continually growing, and over time, like things will line up. Because the job thing is tough because like I said, there's so many things outside of your control. I think you just have to, it's kind of like when people say, how's that quote go? The hardworking people are always lucky or something like that. It's like, like, oh, they got such a big break, but it's like, really, they were just, on their grind for like 2 years, and they were just getting after it. And so it's like, oh, they got this amazing thing. I think there's definitely kind of a checklist of like, can I make CRUD apps? Do I know what APIs are? Have I made them? Can I do some SQL stuff? Have I used all the major JavaScript, CSS frameworks? There's some checkboxes like that, but I really think it's just about continuing to grow until something lines up. Or on the other kind of flip side is And it sounds bad, but like the stronger your network is, the more people you know. Like if I know you really well and I'm working in a place where it's like, hey, we could really, we could take on another developer right now, like those people are going to be at the top of my list to pull in. Yes.
Like you were saying, the difference between developing web apps and
Mm-hmm.
computer science. Have you ever had to use your favorite version in a web app?
The question is, it's a good question. Have I ever, based on my computer science background, basically have I ever like directly used that in a job? I got so close to using it. I'm dead serious. One time, I got so close. I was like, yes, I got this. I don't even remember what it was. And then I was like, actually, there's a better way to do this. And I scrapped it. So like, the answer is basically no. You want to go work for Amazon, Google, Facebook, where they're solving like crazy problems? Yeah, you probably need computer science. But the average programming gig, no. Honestly, you don't.
Well, you can use it for them.
Yeah, so like you asked specifically, have you ever used recursion? And it's like, I mean, like you said, recursion and loops can generally be kind of interchanged. But so here's another great thing that I should mention. There's so many resources online now. I think Stanford has an online class where they put their CS class online. And so if you need to learn about, you don't need to learn about those things. But if you're like, oh, I don't really understand recursion, there's tons of stuff online to go see. And there's also a book, it costs money, but it's called The Imposter Handbook. It's by a guy named Rob Connery who basically breaks down all the important CS concepts. How do you make state machines and how do compilers work and all this kind of stuff, which is really not, like I said, very applicable. But if that is interesting to you, like go get that book and work through it. I think the big overall point is there's a lot of resources out there that weren't there 5 years ago, definitely weren't there 10 years ago, to where like just the time and money it takes to go through that degree, it's not the fastest path to get where you want to go if you want to do development, I guess is the overall point. Good question. Anybody else? All right, thank you.